in. Why are we not willing to stand up? Why are we not willing to spread the faith and defend the faith and die for the faith? Think about John 21, after Peter had denied the Lord those 3 times. He went through some agonizing stuff in John 21. When he was with Jesus again, verse 15 says, when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs, Jesus said. Jesus said to him a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. Listen, I'm convinced this man would have swung his sword until nobody had any blood left. He just wasn't that kind of battle. And he was not ready for the spiritual battle that came his way, and he failed. And the Bible said that Jesus said to him a third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Remember where I told you what commitment's going to involve? Verse 18. Most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and you walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands. And another will gird you and will carry you where you do not wish. This he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. I think he just spelled out crucifixion. Not just death. He spelled out what death he would die. And when he had spoken this, he said, follow me. I think it's the idea of imitation. There's a cross for me and there's a cross for you. Come on, Peter. Follow me. That's what disciples do. That's what disciples do. Put your name in the blank. James, do you love me? Wendy, do you love me? Wendy, do you love me? We could go throughout this whole congregation. Put your name in the blank. Do you love me? The committed disciple says yes. And the proof will be in the proof. The second thing is that we just love the world more. Most of us would say that we don't. But one preacher said that he's afraid that most Christians are thorny Christians. Remember Jesus in the parable of the sower talked about the sower going out to sow seed? And some of that seed fell along the thorny ground. And Jesus talked about that in Mark chapter 4 and verse 7. He said some seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no fruit. It found ground to take root in. The plant came forth, but thorns choked it out. What are the thorns? He answers in verse 18. Now these are the ones among thorns. They are the ones who hear the word. And the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and desires for other things. Highlight it, underline it, circle it, and let it grind in your head. Desires for other things entering in, choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. Cares of this world, deceitfulness of riches, and desires for other things entering in, choke the word. All the things that we let enter in. I want to tell you what 3 of them are. Sports, recreation, and materialism. And all 3 of them are killing us. All 3 of them are killing us. When I was doing this lesson, I just decided to get on the internet and see what somebody else said, and I found a particular article that said 10 reasons that even committed church attenders are attending church less often. Number 1 reason was affluence. Meaning we've got money. And what money does is money brings options. Number 2 was a higher focus on kids' activities. Amen.
Amen.
A higher focus on kids' activities. It thrills me that you have the gospel meetings that you have, and you have 3 of them. I'm not opposed to Sunday through Wednesday meetings, but you want me to tell you what's happened in a lot of places? Sunday through Wednesday meetings have now happened in a lot of places because nobody's going to be there Thursday. Thursday and Friday night, the whole thing's gone down the drain. Because Thursday night is practice night for the kids. Oh, and we're trying to teach our kids commitment to a team. We're not going to be there Sunday because my kid's got a team function. Yes, he does have a team function. And we're trying to teach him that you got to be committed to a team. And when the team meets, and when you're on a team, you do what a team does. That's right. Let me tell you what you just taught him. What you just taught him is that team is more important than the Lord's team.
Amen.
And you say all day long, that's not what you did, but that's what you did.
Amen.
He learned in that the difference between the two. We choose sports over church work. And folks, that's a fact. That's happened. It was said by somebody in the first century, if we can build an arena in every city across this empire, these Christians will soon forget about their God. That's happened. That's the United States of America. We have cathedrals that'll hold 110,000 plus. And folks go crazy. They'll sit there and there'll be water that freezes on their noses, and that's completely sane. But to sit in a padded pew, that's for a bunch of nuts. That's the way they look at it. That's the way they look at it. It is for a bunch of nuts. Folks that are like all crazy for the Lord. And so higher focus on kids' activities. And number 3 is travel. Again, you got money, you got options, you can travel. And so members are not consistent, they're often not there, they're away from the local work an awful lot. And I want to tell you, a life that is shrouded with comfort and security tends to kill commitment. We are lulled to sleep in our lazy chairs. Sewell Hall once went back to a place that he had been to 25 years earlier, maybe longer than that. The church was so strong when he was there earlier, but it was being persecuted. When he went back 25 or 30 years later, they had things about like we have them here in this country. And Brother Hall was talking to one of the oldest members that had been there in the beginning and was there still, and he said, what in the world needs to happen? What do we need to do? He said, Brother Hall, pray for persecution. He said, we were persecuted and we were strong. Now we have everything and we're doing nothing. That's what a life of comfort and security tends to do. Here's another one. The mark of a committed Christian has been reduced to attending the Sunday a.m. assembly. Now, is the Sunday a.m. assembly important? Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Hebrews 10 and verse 25 says that we are not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting each other so much the more as you see the day approaching. What God pretty well said is don't miss. I remember one time in college I got put in a situation and I kind of caved into it and I missed. And I want to tell you, I was eat up with guilt. I was eat up with guilt. I don't know that people feel much guilt anymore because they miss a worship service. But you need to understand, missing those worship services will have an effect. A while back we had a guy that came forward and he said, what happened in my case? He said, I had somebody at home that I had to care for and I didn't come because I had to care for them. He said, but then later that turned into, well, I'm just going to use this as an excuse not to go. He said, and then it became, I just don't want to go. It's like the preacher and a man that was sitting around a fire. The man hadn't been in a long time. He went there and he was talking with the man. He said they hadn't said anything for the first long while. And the preacher finally reached down and got one of the coals of fire out of the fire. And he set that coal over here off by itself. And he said they both sat there and stared at that coal until it got orange and then went less dim until finally it was just a gray piece of coal sitting there. Black piece of coal. And the man said, preacher, I've got your point. He said, I'll be there. I'll be there. He had removed himself from the source of fire. And that's what happens when you forsake the assembling of ourselves together. But my point here is that we've got people who are thinking, I am a committed Christian if I can just check off that box on Sunday. Not so.
Amen.
There is a whole lot more to serving the Lord than just being present at that morning assembly. Here's another one that I'd love to talk about all day, but I can't. And that is that we have yet to develop a deep relationship with the Lord. Again, it's not Sunday only, it's 24/7. We don't clock out, people. We don't clock out. The aim is to love Jesus, and the aim is to be like Jesus in every way. In Luke, the 6th chapter and verse 40, Jesus said, a disciple is not above his teacher, but every disciple who is perfectly trained, will be like his teacher. Well, I would beg for an ass there. Yeah, there is a big one right there. Every man who is perfectly trained will be like his teacher. That's what it's about every day, is becoming like Jesus. And I like to tell people there's a big three. And those big three are reading your Bible, praying, and then meditating on where you are. And that's not happening in the lives of countless Christians. Every day. In Revelation chapter 3 and verse 20, preachers used to, at the end of the gospel meeting, would be offering that invitation. They'd begin to knock. And they'd say, Jesus is knocking at the door of your heart. And they'd use that knock to kind of get your attention if you weren't a Christian yet. The Lord's knocking. And they'd read Revelation chapter 3 and verse 20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me. But folks, that verse wasn't written to non-Christians. That verse is written to Christians. And what Jesus is saying is, I can't get in. You crowded your life so full. I'm knocking, but I can't get in. Open the door and let me in, please. And I will come in and dine with you and you with me. And listen, that's what happens. When you get alone by yourself in your house every single day in your private place and you read your Bible, which is God talking to you, and you pray, which is you talking to God, and sometimes I like to go back and forth. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll read a verse and let God talk to me. And then I'll talk right back to Him about what He just said. And then I'll let Him talk again. And then I'll talk back to Him. And it just goes back and forth in conversation. And then meditating. Meditating on who I am. Turn to John 14. John 14th chapter. And verse 21. In John 14 and verse 21, Jesus said, he who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. Judas not Iscariot said to him, Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not to the world? Jesus answered and said, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word. My Father will love him, and we will come to him, and we will make our home with him. I think Jesus is trying to say here is when you do this kind of stuff, that you really get to know me, and I make myself known to you. I'll come to you, make my home with you. I want to tell you, you can't get more special than that thought. And I want to tell you the reason elders in so many churches are not seeing strong things from people publicly is because they're not strong privately. We have got to get strong privately. I heard one preacher say, it's like we've been inoculated and we never caught the real thing. You know what I mean by that? Come winter, there's probably clinics around here. What they'll do is they'll give you a shot. It's a flu vaccine. And basically what they're doing is they're giving you a little bit of it so that your immune system will attack it and you don't ever catch the full-blown thing. You get a little bit so you don't catch the whole thing. Tragically, that's what happened to us as Christians. We've got a little bit of Jesus, but we've never caught the little thing. We've never gotten to the point that we ought to be. When I was talking about doing this lesson, I was talking to a lady I was studying with, and she gave this one. We allow work days to just knock us out. I did ask David about subjects. He said, well, Jeff, he said, we've got a lot of people that are we're just battling the world every day. The world's just pounding on us every day. And you know it'll do that. And sometimes what you want to do is you just want to go home and get you some comfortable clothes on, climb on your couch, easy chair, and just chill. Never mind the fact that it's Wednesday night and your brothers and sisters on your team are gathering together to worship. And we're tempted just to give in. But I tell people the one thing I think of is I think about how tired Jesus was. Whenever I'm tired and I just am tempted just to not keep going and do what I need to do, I just think about how tired he was when he went to Calvary and what he did. We sing the song, I gave my life for thee. What hast thou given for me? And I want to say this in regard to it. I know that when you got a gospel meeting, you got to get the kids ready. I know that's tough, and I commend those ladies for that. But there's a sense in which worshiping is the easiest thing you do as a Christian. I mean, how hard is it? I took a bath. I put some clothes on. I drove. I didn't walk. I drove to the church building. I sit on a padded pew with air conditioning and ceiling fans. How hard is that? Poor, pitiful souls. And you know, we read about those people that were sown into and stoned. Do you think they would feel sorry for us? I doubt very seriously they feel too sorry for us. Let me give you 3 more quick points. The lesson's yours. Our intensity of love for the brethren has been greatly diminished. We'll just go to 1 Peter 1 and verse 22. 1 Peter 1 and verse 22 simply says, since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit and sincere love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart. 1 John 4 said it this way, He laid down His life for us, and we also ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. If you ask most people in here, would you take a bullet for Jesus? Most people would say, I will. Will you take a bullet for your brothers and sisters in Christ? I would. But you know, that verse may be saying more like this. We lay down our lives in service to the brethren. The context shows service. My life, I live for you. I want to tell you, it might be harder to live for you, brethren, than to die for them. You know, a bullet's pretty quick. Living for you is every day. Do you love the brethren? One of my favorite illustrations is a boy that was told that his sister needed a blood transfusion. She had this rare disease. But his blood had the antibodies that were needed to cure her. And so they asked him if he'd be willing to give his blood for his sister. He thought for a moment and he said, if it'll save Liza, I'll do it. They started the transfusion a few days later, and they were both on gurneys, and they noticed that as the transfusion began, that her face began to brighten up. Color began to return to her face. But they noticed his face was getting more and more pale, and he looked worried and concerned. And they said, what's wrong, little fella? And he said, well, I began to die right away. When they asked him if he would be willing to give his blood for his sister, he thought they meant all of it. If it'll save Liza, I'll do it. Why don't we love the brethren more? Why do we love our friends in the world more? Somebody once said to me, well, nobody's going to miss me anyway. And if that's the truth, we need to fix that. This assembly is not just for you. You come on Wednesday nights and other occasions, and you want to check on everybody and see how they're doing. I remember one time when I was in college, I had a pitiful attitude, and I'd become somewhat lethargic, and I was making all kinds of comments about the congregation and how everything was just dead and all that kind of stuff, and yet I wasn't doing anything. And my friend looked at me and he said, what do you do? What are you doing? Hit me right between the eyes, and I realized all of a sudden, the problem's not with them, it's with me. I started talking to everybody more. I started studying. I started participating in Bible class.